Hey guys, it's me, Mike Rowe. I just talked to Kara on her podcast, Really Famous, and I don't want to overstate it, but I think we may have solved the problems of the world. I mean, this woman took me deep, and I wound up revealing things about myself I didn't even know. So my career is certainly going to take a big turn after this airs, and she promised me a coffee mug as well. Kara, show him the mug. Show him the mug. That's right. All that's coming at you when Kara and I sit down to talk for about 100 hours.
Hi, this is Kara. You're listening to Really Famous, where you really get to know your favorite celebrities on an intimate level, because I was a therapist and that's just what I do. Right now, you are really about to get to know Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe, of course, is the host of Dirty Jobs. You may also know him from Deadliest Catch or How the Universe Works or all those commercials you see on TV. Well, Mike is back on Discovery with an all-new series called 6 Degrees with Mike Rowe, which is actually streaming right now on Discovery Plus. I put a link to Discovery Plus, which is a new streaming service, in today's show notes, so you can quickly and easily find his new show and other shows. Mike also hosts a podcast called The Way I Heard It, which was inspired by his book, also called The Way I Heard It. You can pick up a copy of his book through my Amazon storefront. There's an easy link in today's podcast notes. And there's also a link to his mother's book about your father and other celebrities I have known, Ruminations and Revelations from a Desperate Mother to Her Dirty Son. So yes, you can get that too. And remember, when you use my link to shop on Amazon for absolutely anything, actually, paper towels, an espresso machine, light bulbs, celebrity memoirs, you're helping support the show. So Mike's new show is basically a walk through history, and it looks at some of the biggest moments of our time. It's sort of like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but for history. So as you may have noticed from the little teaser I put at the beginning of this episode, we get pretty personal too. So we cover it all, behind the scenes of Dirty Jobs, and we do a lot of philosophizing. So yeah, let's do it. Here we go.
Hello.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Oh, living the dream and all that.
Of
How are you doing?
course. Same as you. It's like stuck in my, office / dining room studio. So what am I going to do?
I don't know. I'm living in some weird tear in the time-space continuum where every day is Tuesday around 3:30.
So crazy time.
Bananas.
So you were shooting your new show before and then again, like part of it during, right?
Well, I never stopped shooting really through all of this. Like I said, we just sort of shifted and changed. I did 4 episodes of Dirty Jobs back in July at the height of this thing, not the traditional way. I just got the old crew together and we got in an RV. Well, I got tested and just drove up and down the coast for a few days doing these look back specials, which was great fun. This show, 6 Degrees, started the summer before, and it was supposed to be a half-hour show. It's a very simple, non-traditional history show. But after looking at it, I was like, this is really pretty good. It should be an hour. So went back to the sponsor, got some more money, and committed to shooting a full hour, and then COVID. So that ended, and I just couldn't wait anymore. So I went back in July to Georgia at the height of this thing again. And this was a lot of people on a big green screen, and everybody's getting tested every 20 minutes. And
yeah, you have a ton of background actors, like tons of people in that.
Yeah.
This is in July in Georgia, in the middle of one of the peaks of the pandemic.
It was at the peak, and the scenes where you see lots and lots of people, those were probably shot the summer before. What we did was we went back and said, okay, so in this show, we use everything. We use puppets, we use animation, we use green screen, we use every production device at our disposal. And so it just became obvious, let's use the tools that don't require us to hire 100 extras and recreate the Battle of Gettysburg or the great exodus from San Francisco during the earthquake, which we actually shot with puppets, which is completely bizarre, but it kind of works. So in a way, we sort of played the cards we got, but that's what we always did with this show. This is not a typical history show. It's a show for people who normally wouldn't watch a history show.
I heard you talk on your podcast, by the way. Let me jump around a little bit about, so you got a sponsor first. It was right. The sponsor actually came to you.
Yeah.
Right. The U.S. Who, don't, I'm going to say it wrong. So why don't you tell me?
Well, it was a couple. It was API, which was a pipeline company, Petroleum Institute, American Petroleum Institute, and then DCA, who makes pipes. And so between pipes and energy, they're like, look, our industry connects everything. You're doing a show about connections. We would love to be a part of that. And I thought, a lot of people have a really conflicted relationship with oil and natural gas these days. But personally, this computer, wouldn't exist without petroleum products. This microphone, it's all petroleum. So I don't personally have a big problem with it. And I was like, look, if you guys are game, I can't let you have creative control, but if you want to help me do this, they said, great. So it was very strange, Kara, that to have a sponsor on board for an experimental kind of show before you even try to sell it somewhere.
Yeah.
Super weird, but
that's
really
super
cool.
Weird. But I also think that's becoming more common, right? I mean, do you think it is?
Well, there are no new ideas, right? Back in the 60s and 50s, Texaco Theater sponsored the opera. ExxonMobil sponsored Masterpiece Theater. Energy was always sponsoring the arts in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
And of course, before that, it was the soap opera, right? I mean, they called them the soaps because Procter and Gamble paid for everything. So there was a time when one or two sponsors would take care of an entire show and subsidize it. And that just meant you didn't need the money from the network, and it changed the whole creative process as well. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if people will see this show in my industry anyway and be like, oh, well, maybe we should look at it this way.
Right. It is interesting. And so I just actually spoke to somebody a couple of weeks ago who has a YouTube series and actually has a Netflix series or works on a Netflix series with his brother. So his brother is Zac Efron. Maybe you've heard of him.
Sure.
Right. So it's called Off the Grid with Zac Efron. And there are sponsors within the episodes of the show. So it's, like I guess you would call it a sort of a show like yours where they go around the world and they do different things and they spotlight sustainability and that sort of thing. So they got sponsors before selling it to Netflix. He told me. And the reason I was asking, I was like, I'm watching the show on Netflix and it's bizarre to me that I see Travelocity in the middle of every episode and Visa, like they smack a Visa credit card down every restaurant they go to, I'm like, this is weird. So clearly you have sponsors and it just seems weird.
Called?
It's called Off the Grid with Zac Efron.
I'm going to check it out.
It's on Netflix. It's a great show, really like an eye opener, and it's unusual, but cool kind of. It takes the pressure off a little bit, right? Well,
it's odd that Netflix did that because Netflix doesn't do much in the way of advertising. Their whole relationship with their consumers is subscription based,
Exactly.
But you get to a point where it's like, well, where's the money really coming from? And will the viewer accept an integrated sponsor like Visa in a show like that? And, most of them will, as long as you're not trying to be too clever about it.
I agree. Yeah. It's like, that's just part of it, whatever. And this, like you said on your podcast, okay, so what? Like, what's the difference really between, being in a show where they sell commercial, they have commercials, which fund the show, or actually representing a brand, which is really, what's the problem? I don't think, as long as you're honest about it, I don't think people have a problem with it at all.
No, the viewers don't. It's really the industry. It's the actors and the actresses, and with respect, people who really see themselves as artists, and they draw a bright line between their art and the money that pays for the show that they're in. Me, I started my career in the middle of the night on QVC selling things. And I've probably been in 500 commercials over the years for everybody from Ford to Caterpillar to Motorola. So I never thought about the difference between being in a commercial and being in a show that's paid for by commercials. Mm-hmm. But the story I told in my podcast involved a guy named William Peterson, who was in CSI at the time, I think. And it was a pretty famous story about a truck coming into the shot with a big Chevy logo on the grill. And he's like, get that thing away from me. I'm not going to stand next to that. And I was like, dude, that's paying for your show. And it's paying for your salary too. So, everything. Johnny Carson used to stand up in, the middle of his monologue and walk over and stand behind a pyramid of Alpo and sell dog food.
That's great.
Right?
I love it. Yeah. Yes. That's
it was
right.
No
and
big deal.
The radio announcers would announce the commercials, right? They'd announce the ads or whatever.
Yep.
And then product placement came in, right?
Yep.
So then it would be like hidden or whatever. You can't even see it. I remember there was like product placement, I want to say in Seinfeld or something, that era. And so they would just slide something in and you wouldn't notice it or whatever. And maybe that's where people got the idea that like, oh, you can't do that. But so I see that Ford something or other on your wall. So,
oh yeah.
So there we go. 6 degrees.
And that's me artificially inseminating a turkey. If you really want to hear a truly disgusting story.
Sure, go for it.
Do you know how turkeys are artificially inseminated?
I do not.
What's the rating of this podcast I'm on right now?
It's anything we want it to be.
All right. So on Dirty Jobs, I violated every barnyard animal there was. Once we realized the ratings went through the roof, whenever I collected the semen from some various creature and impregnated another, we just went on a jolly romp through America's countryside, looking to artificially inseminate whatever we could. And we did a Thanksgiving special one year at a place called Oakdale Farms. And basically what happens is they bring you a turkey and you turn it upside down and you squeeze it between your thighs. And then they hand you a little glass jar. And the lid on the jar has 2 holes in it. And in each hole goes a straw about this long. And you hold that jar with the 2 straws in it in one hand. And then you stimulate the cloaca with your thumb. Now, the cloaca is it's the term for the space where both the reproductive organs and it's basically the rectum and the penis combined. Turkeys have a penis in their rectums.
Okay.
So if you do the job properly, the turkey will climax, and his rectum will fill with semen. Now, he's upside down at this point. So what you do is you take the jar in your other hand and you put one of the straws in your mouth. And then you put the other straw into the rectum. And then you start sucking. And you create a vacuum in the jar, which allows the semen to come out of the rectum and collect in the jar. And then you spread your legs and the turkey falls to the ground and runs off, and they bring you another one. And you do this, right? day after
Oh
day,
my
hour
God.
after hour.
What?
And you just suck the semen out of the turkey's rectums until the jar's full. And then you put the semen into these little pipettes, and they bring you the hens, females, and those two are turned upside down, and you take it's an injector gun. The pipette goes in, and you insert that, and then pull the trigger, and boom, turkey's inseminated. There would be no Thanksgiving dinner without artificial insemination of turkeys.
That's very interesting.
Every creature.
So you don't think when you're actually sucking on that straw that there's any chance that something would go wrong?
Oh, I thought about that a great deal, Carol. Great deal.
But all good. Didn't happen, huh?
Not to me. No. No, not to me.
Has it happened to other people, you think? Did they tell you?
Sure.
Oh, God.
Everything can happen.
I give everybody who does it or did it credit.
Look, it's only a matter if you have jars of turkey semen sitting around a place of work, it's only a matter of time until somebody's going to step on it, knock it over, accidentally eat it. It's all been done. Everything under the sun has been done, which is why I keep that on my my wall. It's the gentle reminder.
So this obviously never in your wildest dreams would you have expected your life to turn out the way that it has. Like your QVC story is awesome. I love it. In the middle of the night, right? You have the night shift. You've told it a million times. I don't want you to tell it all over again, but does everybody know this story?
I don't remember which ones I've told and which ones I haven't, because I literally spent 3 years, 5 nights a week, usually after a couple of beers and sometimes really after no sleep at all, sitting there trying to make sense of whatever widget they would bring me. It could be a battery, could be a phone, could be the health team infrared pain reliever, could be the Amcor negative ion generator. It was funny because, I was fired 3 times from that gig. And at the time, when I finally left for the final time, I was like, all right, well, I'll never talk about that. That's just something that happened. It was my first job in TV, and it was super weird. But looking back on it now, I realized, really every useful thing that I ever learned that I've been able to bring to my misspent career, I learned in the middle of the night on QVC. And I also learned, I left there in 1993, and in 1998, somebody started posting videotape. Somebody had taped every single shift.
So weird. Why?
I don't know. But it just started popping up on YouTube.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it was cool, but it's very strange. Like the experience of watching yourself on YouTube, which at the time, 1998, it's still kind of new. It was new to me anyway. Like, what is this? What is YouTube? Here I am sitting at a computer looking at a video of myself selling a doll in the middle of the night. Now, I have no recollection of this at all. And when you see yourself on TV doing something you have no recollection of doing, and listening to the drivel that's coming out of your mouth, it's a very strange feeling. And when you realize, okay, there's a lot of that footage out there, and this YouTube thing seems to be a repository for it, and people who used to watch and tape my show now are sharing it with the world. Well, then you can't outrun your past. So you might as well embrace it.
For sure. Yeah.
And then I started talking about those crazy old days in the middle of the night, selling things I couldn't describe, and the stories, the things that would go off the rails and go wrong. That was true live TV. No delay, right? Nothing.
Yeah. So you decided to embrace it, but at first you were probably like, this is just making me uncomfortable watching this, or what? Well,
it did remind me of how much fun I had at the time, most of which I had blocked out. I don't know why. But it reminded me of how far I had come too. Look, I'd never been on TV before. And, back in those days, QVC, they didn't know how to hire successful salespeople. Many good salespeople just aren't good on television.
Sure.
And many people who are comfortable on TV, they don't know how to sell anything. So what they did was they toured the country constantly, auditioning thousands of people for show host jobs. And what they would do was they would ask you to talk about a pencil for 8 minutes. That's what they would do. I sat down at a conference room table in a Marriott, and a guy set up a camera. He's sitting across from me, and he took this pencil out and he rolled it across the table. And he said, Mike, I want you to pick up that pencil, and I want you to look in the camera, and I want you to talk until I tell you to stop. Don't stop till I tell you to. Make me want the pencil. Make me want it real bad. That was the audition. And 8 minutes later, he said, okay, stop talking about the pencil. But that was the number. If you could talk about a pencil for 8 minutes in a convincing way, you were hired and put on this kind of double secret probation, and then they would put you on the air in the middle of the night with no training, none. And they would just bring you all of these dreadful items that had failed to sell in prime time. And so you either sank or you swam.
Sure. So it's a good test for them, and it's a good test for anybody who's doing it, trying to do it. But it's interesting too. I'll tell you what, I can notice even in this talk that we're having, it's very easy for you to just talk about whatever, talk about this, whatever. I feel like you always have things in your brain that you can just, right? Like it seems like, some people are better at that than others. And especially in like an interview setting, right? They're like, either you're going to just talk about things that you think that people are going to appreciate hearing or whatever else, or you're just going to wait for the questions or whatever. I think there are different approaches you could take.
I think so. There's it's a weird muscle. The QVC presentational muscle is odd. And if you have it, you can develop it. If you don't have it, you're never going to get it. But with regard to process, to me, when that job became fun was when I stopped trying to sell the product and amuse the viewer and focused instead on amusing myself. And that, you can't be so indulgent that you ignore the product and ignore the viewer. But if you think about your favorite comedians or your favorite writers, your favorite singers, for me anyway, it's always the people who don't seem terribly concerned about what I think of their performance. They're more interested in making themselves laugh. And, if I can watch that and enjoy it, that makes me a fan, and that makes me a part of that audience. And I learned that on QVC, and I remembered it years later on Dirty Jobs. The trick to that show was to amuse myself, the person I was with, and my crew. And once we got that down, then the viewers of the show, they felt less like viewers and more like people who were along for the ride. Right.
So I'll tell you what, too. I've noticed. So what I did before, when I knew I was going to talk to you in a couple of days, I was like, let me see what Mike's fans think about Mike. What do they want to know about Mike? What do they think? What's their approach? What's their relationship with Mike? And I have to tell you, what do you think I discovered?
Look, if you went to my Facebook page, you found 6 million people with varying opinions. It's a biased crowd, but most of those people are there because I did something that they like. But I don't know. What did you find?
So I think it's more than that you did something that they like. I think they really feel like they know you. It's like what you're saying. I feel like they really 100%, they know Mike Rowe and they know him personally. Like that's how they feel. So there's something that you're conveying. And it's interesting because when you said that that's what you learned from QVC and applied on Dirty Jobs, I think that may be why they feel that way, because you just were you having fun back and forth with the people who you're actually working with, and they got to just tag along and feel like they're there with you.
Well, thanks. And I do think that's a part of it. But I also think the way we shot Dirty Jobs was very, very different. And it's the same way we shoot 6 Degrees. We always have a behind the scenes camera that's wide and shooting everything all the time. And I always know that camera's on. And so when we stop a scene or when we have to break for any number of reasons, that camera still rolls. And in those moments, I'll walk up to that camera and I'll tell the viewer the truth about whatever's going on in that moment. That level of disclosure was really unusual on nonfiction television. And the more we did it, the more permission we got to do virtually anything we wanted. The other thing that really helped me a lot and mattered a lot later was that on Dirty Jobs, we never did a second take. We never did any pre-production. We never did any writing. We never did any casting. We never told, the artificial inseminator where to look or where to sit or how to do their job. It was we were flies on walls, And my feeling was, take 2 is a performance because it's just an attempt to repeat what you did in take 1. And so I just didn't want to do that kind of a show. And the viewer realized that too. And so they knew that for better or worse, what they were watching and what they were seeing was exactly what I saw on the turkey farm the day I showed up.
It's real, right? It's as real as you're going to get. And that's right. That's again, the connection is who you really are. You're presenting who you really are. And that's part of it. So did you got onto Facebook, what, at the beginning or?
No, I was late to the party.
Oh, okay.
I'd like 2010, 2011, maybe. But what I did do at the very beginning of Dirty Jobs in 2003, the network called and said, look, we want to build a chat room, which struck me as super creepy. But we think, we want fans of our shows to have a place to go to talk about the show. And it would be nice if you kind of weighed in once in a while. I said, all right, whatever. Well, what happened was out in the world, doing a dirty job, you go back to the Motel 6 or the Super 8 or, wherever you're staying and you're tired and you open the mini bar, you get a beer or whatever, you sit down and you get in this chat room and you start really chatting with viewers. And I didn't think I'd like it, but I actually loved it. And from that chat room emerged all the ideas for season 2. And so I realized before Facebook, back when Zuckerberg was still in college, I guess, that if you let the viewer program the show, they're going to be way, way more engaged than they otherwise would. And if you let them host the show, which is how I always thought of Dirty Jobs, I was the guest, the viewer, the subject was the host, and so everything was slightly skewed from the normal model. But when the dust settled, it was a show that allowed me to say, look, this show is produced, programmed, and hosted by the people who watch it. I'm just an avatar. And that, that really stuck. And so later when I got on Facebook, that lesson had deeply landed. And I realized, oh man, this is so much bigger than a chat room.
Right.
So, yeah, there's 6 million people on my page right now.
That's so interesting. And especially because Facebook is sort of, like Facebook is the old platform. And, there's a lot of controversy about Facebook too. And it's going strong for you, for sure. There's no question about it.
I do a show for Facebook called Return to Favor.
Right.
It airs on, the thing's been downloaded 400 million times.
That's wild. But again, everything's changing.
I won an Emmy for a show that's not even on TV. I how much weirder does the world get?
The times are changing, but that's, you're obviously going with it. You're trying new things, doing different things. Discovery Plus, that's a whole new thing too. I mean, everybody's got a streaming network. It's happening for a reason. People can get what they want. So there are, I'm sure, tons of people who are going to love Discovery Plus. It's exactly more of what they already love. It's perfect, all in one place. So, and your show is going to be on that. The whole landscape is different. It's like we're talking about with the Netflix and the sponsor. Everything else is different, or things are changing. And then in a way, going back to what they used to be. So let me ask you, I have some serious questions I would like to ask you.
Sure.
Deep questions. I'd like to go a little bit deep.
Oh boy.
Oh, what did you just write?
I just wrote going deep.
Look like a check mark.
Sometimes I just doodle crap. I just sit here and I wasn't writing anything. I was doing the classic news anchor move,
Right.
Mike Rowe here, signing off. We'll see you tomorrow. And then I just turn down and write, whoa, 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 and nothing.
I love it. Then you whisper to the person next to you and say nothing. I got
nothing.
Right.
Nothing. Or something deeply inappropriate.
Right. Maybe not these days. Maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Any regrets in life? Do you wish that you had done anything differently?
A few, too few to mention, as Sinatra put it. I don't have kids. And for a while there, I was like, oh, I definitely have to have some kids. And then I really, got to know the kids that my friends had. I don't want kids. So I didn't have kids. And sometimes I think I should have, maybe I'll adopt one, but it's not a regret. It's just a choice, Career wise, no, I don't have any regrets at all. I guess, I've lived in like 20 states, and there's some places I would have liked to have stayed longer. And there were some places I probably never should have gone. I was a hobo from 1993 until 2001, lived in hotels, lived in studios, recording studios. I mean, it's a good life. I'm not complaining about it, but I was very, very, very transient for a long time. Not a regret, but it was just kind of a weird time in my life. And, I'm not, I'm not sure it was really time well spent, but not a regret.
Right. That's so interesting. Right. So it's like you reflect on them and you wonder, but you don't necessarily regret.
I had there's a fictitious character called Travis McGee who stars in 22 amazing pulp fiction novels. In fact, right over here, I'll show you. This guy, John D. McDonald, wrote the best pulp fiction ever. And he created a character named Travis McGee who lived on a houseboat down in Bahia Mar, Florida, and basically solved crimes. It was just this boat bum who had a great philosophy of the world. And one of the things that he did in life, his fictitious life, was take his retirement early and in installments. So when he was in his 20s, 30s, and 40s, he would always take a couple of months off in between adventures. And I just remember being so enamored of that lifestyle that I actually embraced it. When I left QVC, fired for the third time, I started taking jobs that let me travel, and I started freelancing. And in between the jobs, I would basically just goof off for a couple of months. And I looked at it as, all right, you're going to wind up working for the rest of your life. You might as well enjoy your retirement in little chunks now, just like Travis McGee. So, do I regret those years? No, I don't. But I really do wonder what I might have done had I actually sat down and applied the work ethic that my foundation today is so focused on.
Right. But see, here's the thing. I think that what would be much more common is if you didn't live like that for that period of time, you would regret it. Right. I think that if anything, people look back at times when they didn't try something like that, or they didn't run free, or they didn't follow their passion. And that's what they regret. So I think it's not surprising that you don't regret it. And if you didn't do it, I think you might have regretted it.
It's just greener grass, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The grass is always greener. It doesn't matter what you do.
So what about the kids? At what point did you think to yourself, should I adopt? Should I have kids? Is this something that I should be thinking about, or do I want? What was that process like?
It was a long time ago, and I was with a girl at the time who was absolutely sure she wanted them. And that made me look at our relationship, in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. I didn't want to be unfair to her. We were in love, but she was very clear. I'm on this earth to have 2 to 4 kids, and I want you to be the father. And I just remember thinking, wow, you want me to be the father before you want me to be your husband.
Oh, that's interesting.
Somebody asked me the other day about my parents. My dad's 88, my mom's 83. They're still together. They're still vibrant. They're still doing what they do. And they asked me what their secret was. I'm like, I don't know if they had a secret, but there was something that my dad was very clear about to my brothers and I as we were growing up. It was very clear to us that he loved us. He loved us a lot, and he would do virtually anything for us. But he loved his wife more.
Oh, it's so interesting. Okay. That was clear.
Crystal clear. And so clear that it didn't strike me as strange growing up. It was just the way it was. Dad loves mom, and then he goes away and makes money so mom can raise us. And this is how it works. Dad also loves us, but dad loves mom first. And when I look around today at so many of my friends who are raising their kids, I'm really struck often by the fact that the kid has become the most important thing in the household. The kid has become the most important thing to the parent instead of the spouse. So
that is interesting. And I do think that's part of a product of the times, of how everything with the prioritization of kids, the helicopter parenting, all of that together, it's sort of like upside down, right? I remember a time when I was at my son's soccer game. I don't remember how old he was. He was little. And I remember all the parents were on the sidelines just watching these kids. And the field was like a little bit raised compared to the seats. We all brought our own little like carry-in seats. And I remember like looking around thinking, this is really like fundamentally upside down, that we're all here. The people who are the big focus are the kids, these little kids. And it was really just that activity in and of itself would be harmless, I'm sure, fine, but it was representative of what's kind of going on all over the place, like you're saying, in the house, outside of the house, activities, whatever else. I do think that's a thing that it never was before.
No. And it's like the frog in the boiling water. It just got worse and worse. Like after the soccer game, not only are people still staring at the kids, they're applauding as every one of them gets the trophy. Right. And they to grow up certain that you're the center of the universe.
Yeah, that's tough.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe it's good for self-esteem to some point, but no, that's not the way we were raised. It was, look, you're not the center of the universe. Mike, you're not the center of anything. The universe is a very big place, and you're a comet just kind of burning through, or maybe you're a planet stuck in orbit, but you are not the center of things. Yeah. You're not the sun. Sorry. Well,
I don't think, since you grew up that way, you don't seem to me like you have a confidence problem, a self-esteem problem at all. So knowing that you weren't the number one doesn't seem to have impacted you in a negative way. Well,
look, it's a journey, right? I mean, I stuttered until I was, I stuttered badly till I was 12, and then I stammered all the way till I was like 17. And I was very shy as a kid, remarkably shy. And not a commentary on my parents at all. They were terrific in every way, but I needed another influence in my life when I was in high school. I had my grandfather, who was next door, who built the house I was born in without a blueprint, who was a genius, and that's who Dirty Jobs was actually inspired by and dedicated to. And my parents, who were great, but I had no connection to the entertainment world and no interest in the entertainment world until a high school teacher named Fred King literally took me by the scruff of the neck and made me sing. Can't stutter when you sing. And as it turns out, I could carry a tune. And he kept me after school, and he taught me how to sing. And then he forced me to audition for a musical. Oh, it was a nightmare. And I told him, I said, look, I'm never going to get through these monologues. He said, you'll be fine. Get on stage. He put me on stage, this guy. And I got 20 seconds into a monologue. I'm kind of stammering along, and he says, Mikey, love what you're doing with the part, but the character you're playing, character doesn't stutter. So you can do that Porky Pig stuff on your own time. Just do this without the stammer, for me. And without thinking about it, it was an impossibly glib thing to say, but without thinking about it, I trusted him so much. I went back to the top and I did it without the stammer. And 20 seconds in, he looks at me like maybe you could choose to act like a guy who doesn't stutter if you don't want to stutter. And it was one of those oh. And so I kind of chose to be somebody different.
So purposefully, right. You were like, I'm going to be this guy instead.
I'm going to be this guy.
Yeah.
And then I started auditioning for all sorts of other things. I got in the opera. I sang for 8 years in the Baltimore Opera, and that I wasn't on a path to do any of this, as a kid. I just wasn't. It took a completely separate force of nature to redirect me and then kick me in the ass.
So personally, what's one of the lessons that you've kind of learned upon reflection about relationships? Did that one relationship teach you anything? I don't want to tell you what the lesson was, but was there any lesson that you gleaned from or about relationships?
Yeah. There's no such thing really as cheating on someone. We hear it all the time, and it's happened to most of us. But the person you really cheat on is yourself. And everything that follows that is symptomatic. That's an early lesson, and you realize it. And you either change your behavior as a result or you don't.
That's a really interesting lesson and good advice. And lots of time. I think it applies to other things too, in a sense. It
applies to everything.
Right.
Look, Eleanor Roosevelt said, nobody can make you feel bad without your permission.
Right.
It's the same sort of thing,
So is this I don't want to get too personal. Tell me if I am. Did this happen where you cheated on somebody else and then you learned that was a mistake?
No, it's the other way.
The opposite?
It was the other way. And I guess I was in a position where I was pretty sure the relationship was going to end anyway, at some point. And then I learned this thing had happened. And then she was very, 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 very sad about it and sort of apologized and said, look, I've done this thing and I've cheated on you. And because I mean, I was hurt, but I wasn't devastated. And I was in a place where I thought, well, you know what? Maybe there's a magnanimous thing to say here. Maybe this is my way out of the relationship, which I know is going to end anyway. And I remember saying, it sounds so paternalistic looking back on it, but I said, no, look, you didn't cheat on me. You cheated on you. And for that reason, of course I forgive you. And I hope you can forgive yourself too.
And that's what you said, like, right? That was your first reaction? Good for you. What? That's amazing.
Well, I drove home later, pulled over, threw up, cried, felt like complete, garbage for a couple of days. But, once I kind of got rid of the stammer and got into the entertainment world and was trying to find my way, I did this thing where in my personal life, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but... Oh,
I was a therapist. That's why you're telling me this.
Jesus.
I used to be a therapist before I did this.
Well, you really put me on the couch there, didn't you, Kara?
Sorry.
No, it's all right. I would imagine sometimes in private moments, intimate moments, sometimes just during a banal dinner, I would imagine cameras in the room, and I would imagine the moment in my life as a scene. And I wondered, how would that scene be shot? I didn't know anything about filmmaking, but how would we be a medium shot, tight shot? Would that be on a jib? Would that be, how would we capture this scene? And once you start thinking about the geography of your life in terms of a scene on the screen, then the next thing you think about is, well, what would I say? What would I say when the camera comes in and the ingenue looks at me and tells me that she cheated on me? Well, it depends on what kind of character I want to be. Do I want to be a stammering, stuttering, weeping victim with big snot bubbles coming out of his nose and the whole lip routine? I don't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be that guy when I was that guy. And so right. In a moment like that, and believe me, I didn't unpack all this in real time, but when I look back at some of those moments in my life that felt like, wow, that was instructive. That was a seminal moment.
But yeah.
I find myself saying things that I think would play well on the page or on the screen. Not necessarily things that I actually feel, but I'm trying to get the scene to end in a way that leaves me a little dignity.
That is so interesting. I think that's the product of two things, right? It's like you're saying with your background in TV, it makes you start thinking that way. But also it's like what your teacher did. He was like, who are you going to be, right? So that really sunk in. You have taken that with you, not just about the stammering, but you have taken that with you, it sounds like, your whole life.
Big lesson. You look, we're works in progress.
Yeah, all of us.
Right? And people love to say, you know what? People don't really change. No, people change.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
People change.
By the way, so true. I mean, not everybody does. Some people don't, right? Some people don't. They choose not to. And so they're not going to. They're going to be the same forever because that's what they want to be. But I have seen more changes in people over time than lack of change. So I agree with you about that.
Why? I mean, yeah. Why don't people see the prospect of becoming a new thing as liberating? Why do they see it as something terrifying?
So that's an interesting question. And I do think it's much more common to fear change than to embrace it and look forward to it. So by nature, me personally, I love change. I live for it. And if I don't have it, I'm miserable. So like stagnation to me in all forms, it just doesn't feel good. I love when things are changed up. So it's hard for me to understand, to relate. As a therapist, though, I should have an answer, right? What do you think?
Well, I don't think cookie cutter advice is ever good, he said in a cookie cutter advisory way. I think it's one of the great, I think it's just a terrible thing we do to people when you take a piece of advice that might make sense for somebody and then turn it into a platitude or a bromide or a trope. I think all the time now of these, the successories, right, that you see on, right? So it's like, let me think of it, a good example. Okay, you said it earlier. Follow your passion. Follow your passion is something we tell our kids. It's something that you can see everywhere on 1,000 different pieces of swag and posters and all sorts of other things. But is it really the best thing to say to the most people? I mean, if you watch American Idol, my God, episode 1, you see thousands of people following their passion because for 20 years, they've been told that if they want it badly enough, they can have it. And if you don't have what you want, you just aren't passionate enough. And so many of these people learn for the first time in their lives that just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you can't suck at it. And they realize on national TV that they can't sing. And this comes as a great shock.
Right.
Because they've been told. They're like the kids playing soccer. And
I was thinking exactly that. Right.
They've got the trophy. There's all this reinforcement. I'm the center of the universe. What do you mean I can't sing? I was told there would be cake, right? No, you can't, right? So, one of the things I did on Dirty Jobs was revisit all these old platitudes and try and come up with an alternative take on advice. In fact, that poster, I swear to God, I had no idea where we're going here. But
we're on the insemination poster. Yeah.
It says at the bottom, don't follow your passion, but always bring it with you. Look.
Oh, that's interesting.
If passion is truly important, then you would never want to be without it. But if it's all important, then you're going to follow it around. And where is it going to take you? Maybe someplace great. Maybe someplace where you don't have the requisite skills to actually thrive at the activity in question.
Yeah, we could even use that in the personal arena too, right? Because sometimes you may have that passion towards somebody who's not good for you, relationship-wise, right?
All day long.
That's almost an easier example. So like I'm big on, I believe in listening intuitively to yourself, right? About what you want to do, what you feel is important, what you feel is right. Like I really am all about the inner voice. And I think that's just that's why I became a therapist probably. I don't know, one versus the other, cause and effect. That's another conversation. But where am I going with this? What did I just say? I totally lost my train of thought.
That's the sign of a great conversation. Now, I can either try and guess where you were going, or I can save this slightly awkward moment by giving you the exact example of the thing you're talking
All right, fine.
about.
I like awkward moments sometimes because they're real. Like you said, I give real. By the way, to my viewers and listeners, I'm all about giving them real, just like you do, but in a different way. So I'll let them hear the awkward moment, and then I'll also let you save it. So what have you got?
My inner voice, when I was a kid, told me with extreme clarity and persuasiveness that I would follow in my grandfather's footsteps. My granddad was the guy I mentioned who lived next door, who built our house without a blueprint. He dropped out of the 7th grade in 1916 or something and went to work. And by the time he was 30, he was an electrician. And after that, he became a plumber, steam fitter, pipe fitter, mechanic, just a master tradesman. He's the kind of guy who could take your watch apart and put it back together blindfolded. I was sure I would follow in his footsteps. And from 12 until 17, every day I worked as his apprentice. I helped with all the activities and all the construction work that he did. And I bitched up everything. I wasn't a disaster, but none of it came easy. And one day I messed up the pour on a foundation, got the concrete mix all wrong. And he said to me, Mike, you can be a tradesman if that's really what you want. Just get a different toolbox. And that was the advice that really prepared me for Fred King, who said, here's the first tool in your new toolbox, learn to sing. And so the big lesson for me was I had that inner voice and it was telling me what to do. And my skills simply were not commensurate with my dream. And that's a very, very painful time. That was my American Idol moment when I realized I'm not going to do the thing I was sure I was going to do or be the person I was sure I was going to be. And then you enter the wilderness where you have to figure out, well, then what then are you going to be? Because if the identity you chose for yourself turns out to be a dry socket, then you got to replace it with something. And so that's kind of my journey. Was I had certainty and I had passion, but I didn't have the skill that I needed for the thing I thought I wanted to do. Interestingly, I did have the skill for a thing I wasn't interested in doing at all. So I had to learn how to like TV and how to like performing. And I did. It was just backwards for me because my voice changed early. I got rid of my stammer and I was narrating these documentaries all over the place. People thought I was 40 years old. I was 20.
But that's another example of people do change and things change. Life changes. You just picked up your pencil again. I wonder what you're thinking about writing down now. Should you take notes?
I'm just thinking, if I had to talk about this for 8 minutes,
you could do it forever.
Could I do it?
Of course you could. So getting back to your narration of your life, your personal life as you're living it, using your narrator's voice, your who am I going to be voice. So what about your personal life all these years? You there's a lot about your professional life, but what's the track? What was the course of it? What has the course of it been as you've built your career?
Well, on the romance side, I've always been a bit of a serial monogamist. And I've always been attracted to women who were fairly certain of who they were and what they wanted. This is kind of a therapist thing to say, but some people are attracted to C's because they're a C, and when two C's get together, they make an O, and everybody wants to be an O.
Wait, so we're talking about the personality types here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
well,
okay.
More or less. I mean, I'm saying I've always looked for people who were already O's because I see myself as an O. And when an O meets a C, it gets weird because they don't fit. C's attract each other. O's attract each other. I look for O's, at least historically. And so I find them because, of course, when you tell your brain to go look for something, it'll find it. And so I found women who were immensely tolerant of my Travis McGee take his retirement in advance life, at least during the period. Yeah.
So tell me more about that. Right. So they were very flexible with that, which
yes.
Do you look back and analyze?
Second guess some. Look, I mean, yeah, there's always the one that got away story. I had a particularly fascinating couple of years when I was working for American Airlines back in 1995. I was doing all the in-flight entertainment on any flight longer than 3 hours. This was when the airlines realized that real estate at the front of the plane was really valuable. And so they sent me around the world to do whatever show I wanted in the cities that they served, the big cities, Buenos Aires, Sydney, Perth, Bruges, didn't matter. I would go with my cameraman and a crew would meet us there. And I had something called a D3, which was a must fly. So I could, in 1995, walk up to any gate for American Airlines, show them this pass. They would make a call, confirm the code, and me plus one were flying first class to wherever that plane was going.
Sweet deal.
Sweet deal, right?
Yeah.
So I did the show for about a year and a half, and it was great. And then new guy came in, show got pulled off, and they licensed Seinfeld. But in the confusion of the transition, they didn't take the D3 back. So from 95 to 97, I was single, working in my chosen field, taking my retirement in early installments, and dating. And the kind of date that I was in 1995 was the kind who would say, "Oh, Carol, you want to grab breakfast sometime?" "Sure," you'd say. And I'd say, "Great, I know a place in New Orleans. Let's go now." And so we go to the airport. Before 9/11, there's not a whole lot of rigmarole. You just show them the thing. They walk you on the plane. They sit you down in first class. And at this point, you're like, "Who are you?" Right. And I say, "No one of any consequence." And so, it was a great time to date because I could fly anywhere in the world for free. And yeah. And so I did. And I met some really interesting women in those days. And did I see them exactly for who they were? Did I, was I looking for, a wife, or was I just doing my best Travis McGee? I don't know. But again, not a regret.
Just a thing, just a reflection of what it was. So what about now? Serial monogamous still? Are you with somebody now? Are you?
Yep.
Yeah. Long term.
Yep. Yes.
And O?
Oh yeah. Although, maybe. She might be a K.
What the heck is a K? What is a K?
Well, when you put a K next to an O, it's okay.
Oh, or is it a KO?
Or a KO. That's very good. A knockout. Huh. Very clever of you, Kara.
Oh, thank you. It just came to me. So how's your relationship then? What's the have you learned things from it, or how has it changed? Are you in a better place now to have that non-retirement chunk? I don't know. No, that whole thing. Look, I'm living my life backwards and upside down. Okay.
I'm working harder now. I'm 58. I'm working harder now than I ever have in my life. Pandemic potentially notwithstanding, that's obviously colored all sorts of stuff. But I do a show called Somebody's Got to Do It. Dirty Jobs is headed back on the air. Returning the Favor is in production with Facebook. 6 Degrees is now on Discovery Plus. And I run a foundation called Mike RoweWORKS that's been around now for 12 years, and that takes up every spare minute of time. I owe Simon & Schuster another book. Right. So, I mean, my old business model completely crapped the bed, and everything that I thought I knew I wanted to do, my retirement and early installments, all of that whole business model completely failed when Dirty Jobs became a hit.
But that's very lucky that you got your retirement in early.
It's very lucky too that I didn't have any real success early.
Yes.
I mean, not that I'm like sweet it, but
And not that I'm saying you weren't successful early, but, by nodding my head and saying yes, but that's absolutely true. I think that when you look back again with these regrets, no regrets, not regret, because again, you were able to have the retirement and early installments. You're able to have this now, live it in reverse. So are you a reflective person normally? Like, do you do a lot of thinking about yourself?
No, I'm fairly self-absorbed. I've given it a lot of thought. And in fact, I thought you were just going to say that, I mean, that level of navel gazing and that level of reflection often, these days anyway, seems to lead people to conclude that everything happens for a reason. And I'm not that guy. I'd be more inclined to say the reason everything happens is because you choose to do it. I don't feel like there's a cosmic plan or some celestial thumb in the small of my back pushing me and guiding me. It's kind of pleasant to think that you're part of a larger plan, but in the end, I think most people go through periods where they're empowered by the notion of free will and then terrified by it.
Okay, tell me more about that. That's interesting. Terrified by it.
Well, yeah. It's very liberating to know that the world is your oyster and you have every opportunity to go in whatever direction you want. Mm-hmm. It can also be terrifying to be in that exact position, depending on what you've just come out of and what kind of life you've had. I used to think that career-wise, the dream job would be a network who said, Mike, gosh, we're such fans. Why don't you just take this money and do any show you want, and we'll put it on the air? I used to think that level of autonomy and creative permission was the goal. But another one of the QVC lessons that I didn't realize I learned when I learned it was, no. You, for me anyway, you need sides. You need parameters. So my reputation on QVC was one of a devil-may-care comedian who worked the late night shift and was kind of an anarchist who did everything, But the truth is, if you compare me to lots of other people on TV, I wasn't outrageous at all. I didn't do anything particularly interesting. But if you compare me to the people who preceded me and followed me on that 24-hour broadcast, I was outrageous. So what I learned and what I later did, with Discovery was I realized where the lines were. I realized the expectations for a QVC host were actually very rigorous. And the expectations for a Discovery host were equally baked in. All the hosts behaved the same. They all talked like this, right? They all wore the same basic thing. Everybody is kind of like a news anchor. We all kind of fell into this archetype. And what I learned was it's fun to change the archetype, but you can't change the archetype unless you're surrounded by examples of it. And so Dirty Jobs stood out because it was surrounded by a certain anodyne kind of sameness and predictability.
Got it. Right? That makes sense.
Now, how does that translate to women? How's it translate?
Go ahead. Bring it back to women for me, Mike.
I think, man, how does that translate to women? If a woman tells me that anything's possible, that she's game for any kind of adventure, she's standing by to prepare any type of meal, that her entire strategy to please me is to say yes, regardless of my request, then we'll part friends. Because that woman, she's not really interested in pleasing herself first. She's trying too hard to please me. She's a C, not an O. And so people who let you know what's important to them and who make it clear where they stand with regard to standards, expectations, whatever you want to call it, those people are more comforting to be around because you know where you stand, you know what they value, and you can then choose to please them or disappoint them, depending on your own proclivities. So I do think I think there's a parallel between the way you look at an opportunity and the way you look at a job and the way you look at a mate. You know, you either know where you stand or you don't. It's better to know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's interesting. So how do you feel about talking about this personal stuff? Is that like a...
Well, you know, I can't imagine anybody cares, really. It is fun to look inward. It's a little tricky for me, just on a practical level, because I have been for the last 8 or 9 years dealing with what you call some stalking issues.
Oh, that's something.
Oh, yeah. And it's manageable. It's always been manageable, but it's the downside of being yourself. If you have any level of celebrity, you know, it's always been a nightmare to me to imagine being like Gilligan, right? On Gilligan's Island, or, you know, some famous person who became famous for a character.
Right.
Now you have to live your whole life with people seeing you as this.
Right. George Costanza.
That's right. That would drive me crazy. People who know who I am or who think they know me actually do, because I'm not a character.
Right.
Better or worse, all this blah, 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 it's me. And, you know, I'm forthcoming here. I was forthcoming on Dirty Jobs and really everywhere. But the downside of that, the upside is you don't have to ever pretend to be someone you're not. Mm-hmm. The downside is when you come into someone's home vis-a-vis a screen, you know, you might be in their living room, their kitchen, you might be in their bedroom.
Yep.
And when you're yourself, that connection is real. And for some people, it just lands in an unhealthy, unnatural way. And I learned that at QVC too. That was a very, very interesting dynamic. You know, a lot of lonely hearts watched that channel.
Oh, so how did you know? How did they reach out to you?
Oh, well, I mean, letters in those days, lots and lots of letters. And then, you know, it's not a terribly difficult thing, even back then, to find where somebody lived.
That's really tough.
Oh, yeah.
So now, do you have like stalkers, plural?
Yeah, I got a couple going right now. Got a couple restraining orders out there. You know, and so my girlfriend works in a completely different industry. And she has really very little interest in in what I do.
Which is maybe really good.
Yeah, I mean, it has been. She's bemused, you know, and I'm bemused by her. And so, you know, we kind of came from this place of shared bemusement. And now, because I do what I do, life's a lot simpler when she stays on the front line of, say, you know, legal documents and things like that.
Got it, right.
So I live pretty much under the radar. And that's by design. So I don't, you know, I leave her out of it. It's a deal we made a long time ago, and I don't talk specifically about who she is or what she does or anything like that. But it's easy because I've never been a Hollywood guy. I lived there for a while, but you know, I've always tried to stay out of the machine, and she has no interest in the machine, and that's made it easier.
That's good. But those stalkers, though, that's not good. So they still, even with her on all this stuff, they've still found you, I guess.
This is a level of yes is the answer, but you have to. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this in your own practice, but there's a real phenomenon that's kind of unique to television, where people believe you're talking to them in a code.
Oh, okay. I didn't think that was what you were going to say. Okay. What?
No, this is a level of disconnectivity. And I thought it was super strange the first time I saw it, but I've seen it a bunch. And people think when you do and say certain things on television, use certain words, everything is accompanied with a subtle kind of wink. I'm talking just to her. And that there's some sort of term for it, I'm sure, some sort of disassociativeness, but it's real. And so, yeah, men and women, people are sure that I have engaged them in a conversation that has nothing to do with anything that's being said. That's
so interesting. But you can't let that stop you, I guess, right? You still have to keep doing your thing, but you have to kind of block it out to some degree, I would imagine. But it's like I was saying before, that the vast majority of people do feel like they know you. But that's another level entirely. The pros and cons of being yourself. Well, it's what your success, it's what made you successful. And it's what has also brought you this situation. So, yeah.
It's like the sign at Disneyland, that says you must be this tall to get on the ride.
Yeah.
Well, I am. I'm on the ride.
Right, so, right. And they're not going to stop it in the middle to let you off, and nor do you want to get off it, right?
No. Sometimes you just have to throw up.
Right. So, okay, let me ask you, I want to do a little quick Q&A, fan Q&A for you, which I'll ask you in a second, but I want to just get to my last question that I normally ask. 2 parts. The first one is, what is the image that people generally have of you? Who do they think you are?
Well, on the one hand, I believe they think I'm a fairly straightforward, authentic guy. On the other hand, many of them are confused because TV is an immensely powerful thing. And no matter how many times I say it, when you look at Dirty Jobs over and over again, and it's been on 500 times a year since 2013, you would assume that I am a handy guy who is very capable of doing what my grandfather did. And so because I run a foundation that revolves around the skilled trades, that further bolsters this belief that I am a tradesman. And I am only in my mind. Mm-hmm. I approached my career like a tradesman on the advice of my pop. But I can't build this desk. I can't. The list of things I can't do that people assume I can is mind-boggling. And even though it's no secret, when people who love Dirty Jobs, love it, find out that I used to sing in the opera or sell things on QVC, the cognitive dissonance is real. And sometimes if those people might disagree with me politically or disagree with me on something else, then they think I'm fraudulent. So it's a weird mix. The cognitive dissonance that arises from the disconnect fueled by the optics of Dirty Jobs is in direct opposition to the authenticity people ascribe to me when they see me being forthcoming on television.
That's a very unique situation. Yeah. And complex. Right. I guess that's one of those things too, that after a while of that happening, you started to figure out like, oh, what is going on here? But it does get tricky. And I guess some of the politics probably too, right? That's where that must get messy and confusing and complex and misunderstood all the time, I would think.
Well, everything is political today. Everything.
Right. Today of all times. Yeah.
Right. And look, you can look at Dirty Jobs, and if you're on the left, you might see a straight up love letter to manual labor and a nod toward the unions and attaboy for the worker. And all of that's true. But if you're on the right, you might look at it and see an homage to entrepreneurship and a love letter to small business and sacrifice. And that's true too. So yeah, people assume a lot of things about me based on that show and based on the foundation that I run that aren't necessarily true.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. So the second part of that question is, who are you really?
Mike Rowe.
And who's Mike Rowe? I wasn't going to let you off that easily, Mike.
Well,
it was a good try, though.
I'm the oldest son of John and Peggy Rowe, both of whom still love me, but not as much as they love each other. I am a former student of Fred King, who used to stammer, but then found his way. I'm the grandson of Carl Noble, who told me I could do whatever I wanted to do as long as I got a different toolbox. And ultimately, I'm a guy who hosted a show called Dirty Jobs that paid tribute to all three of those people, and gave me permission to run a foundation that so far assisted over 1,000 kids get the training they need to become a skilled tradesman. The very thing that I set out to do, but couldn't on account of my own limitations. I'm that guy.
Nicely done.
This is big. There is more where this came from. Mike and I actually talked for 2 hours, and at the end, we did a fan Q&A, and it is as good as the rest of this episode. He answers big questions like, will he run for president? Many of his fans truly hope and believe he might. Whether he's ever been married and what he thinks about marriage in general, thoughts on hosting a game show such as Jeopardy, how Dick Clark changed his life, and we analyze concepts like teamwork versus individuals, efficiency versus effectiveness, and innovation versus imitation. So you will want to catch it, I think. It's the Mike Rowe fan Q&A, and it's on my YouTube channel right now. Just click the link in today's show notes or go to youtube.com/reallyfamous. Tap that subscribe button and then tap the notifications bell because there are more video interviews coming. I drop new ones about once or twice a week. Oh, by the way, that Netflix show that I was telling Mike about at the beginning, I was wrong. I was calling it Off the Grid, but it's not Off the Grid. That's a separate YouTube series with Zac and Dylan Efron. Dylan, who, by the way, was on my show last week. The show on Netflix is called Down to Earth with Zac Efron. So, wrong name, good show. Catch Mike's new Discovery Plus series, 6 Degrees with Mike Rowe, pick up his book or his mom's book, and head over to my Amazon storefront for an assortment of fun things. Amazon.com/shop/reallyfamous. I'm Kara. Thanks for hanging out with Mike and me. I will talk to you soon.